Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the Articulation Program. Just a few housekeeping announcements before we get started. You can use the Q&A button on your screen to type your questions to our presenters at any time. Your camera and microphone are off, so the panelists cannot see or hear you. And this is just one of many different sessions happening today. So be sure to check out the full schedule at strivescan.com/OACAC-articulation. And this presentation is being recorded and will be available within about a week at that same website, strivescan.com/OACAC-articulation. And now I will turn it over to our presenters.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dave Dietrich. I'm the Director of Recruitment and Admissions at the Ohio State University ATI Worcester campus. I will be moderating the session today. So I'll be looking at the Q&A. As you type those in, I will make sure to prioritize your questions to present to the panelists, and we'll move forward through all the questions that you have. So I hope you all enjoy the session. And I'm going to turn it over to Tyler Bradshaw to introduce himself and have the other panelists introduce themselves as well. Tyler.
Thanks, Dave. Hi, everybody. My name is Tyler Bradshaw. I am an Associate Director of Admission in the Office of Admission at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. I haven't been to Oxford in what feels like months, though. I'm still working remotely from my home in Mason. I primarily recruit in the greater Columbus area, work specifically with Franklin, Delaware, and Knox counties, as well as a few others, and also help with some of our academic initiatives on campus recruitment for our nursing program, Farmer School of Business, and other competitive programs. And I've been at Miami in some way, shape, or form since about 2011 as a staff member. So this is definitely unlike any other year, and glad to be able to talk about it with all of you.
I'll go next. My name's Stephanie Drugan. I'm a college and school counselor at New Albany High School. We are a public school of about 1,600 students, and we are located in a suburban area outside of Columbus, Ohio.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Tracy Stockard. I am the Director of College Counseling at Gilmore Academy in Gates Mills, Ohio. And we are a small, private, independent, day boarding, Catholic co-educational school. So I think I got every one of the adjectives. And I am here on campus 5 days a week, full time. So we're gonna ride this out as long as we can.
Okay, so I'm gonna start it off by asking Stephanie, why don't you start on this? How are students feeling about the college search process at this point?
Ooh, so, you know, we've obviously had to change some things that we typically do with students. You know, we are doing a lot more virtual meetings with students, and we are changing our senior evening meeting presentation to be a video. So we're really kind of trying to change some of those processes around. We are still using Naviance. We are moving to electronic transcript requests this year so that we do not have paper going back and forth. So just a lot of those kinds of things about you know, ways that we could still help serve students, but maybe in more of a virtual or paperless format.
Tracy, do you want to add on to that as well?
Yeah, I would say we're doing very much the same thing. Actually, we just did a recording for our senior college kickoff, which we dropped on Monday. We too are going paperless for the college application requests. I'm a little nervous about. We're going to be having the kids import their selections into Naviance. So we're kind of giving up control, which is always hard to do, but again, it'll avoid the contact of paper. I think the one thing for me that I've been surprised, but maybe not, is that I assumed when I came back that I'd be doing a lot of my meetings virtually with the kids, even though they're on campus, because who wants to wear a mask for an hour at a college meeting? But it's been quite the opposite. Kids just, because we're here, they want to meet with me directly. They want to sit in my office and have, I think, that human contact that they've been missing and craving since March. So I'm trying to do some meetings outside when I can, just so we can take the masks off.
Totally get it. Tyler, I'm going to direct this kind of to you first. Can you discuss Miami's campus plan for visits and tours, and how you're going to handle kind of the recruitment aspects of those?
Sure, and I'll talk about it from both sides of the campus visit that happens in Oxford, and then also what we typically do in the fall. So in terms of campus visits, Miami has not yet, for our student population, we've not yet resumed in-person instruction. We did announce, you probably saw on the news that we announced we are going to be bringing students back to campus. They'll start moving in, I believe, on September 14th, and then we have a phased move-in plan. Once those students are back on campus, and those are our student tour guides that we rely on, we will eventually phase in our campus visits again, but that will probably look drastically different from what it has looked like in the past. We have not yet resumed taking registration for those visits. We've not announced any dates or what the volume will be. I do think that you will see Miami and a lot of other schools, because we're having to restrict the size of tour groups and the number of visitors we have on campus. I think you will see schools probably limit some of those college visits to seniors, especially in the fall, just to make sure that those students who don't have as much time to work with are given an opportunity to come visit the campus, and then we'll eventually phase back in juniors and sophomores, that sort of thing. In terms of the high school visits, so our travelers are not traveling. We are not going out on the road this fall. It's just something that, number one, I don't know that high schools would even be at a point where they could host us, at least the majority of high schools. But number two, we have to protect the safety of our staff and make sure that we're putting them in a healthy situation. Instead, we're going to be doing virtual high school visits. I know I work primarily in Columbus, and I've already got my new Albany visit scheduled. So we are primarily doing individual visits with high schools. But the other thing that is happening that will likely be useful is there are some high schools and counselors, I know your staff is small and you just don't have the bandwidth to coordinate those individual visits and things like that. Our team, we're going to be hosting, each recruiter will host 2 individual open visits throughout the week that students from any high school can attend. It won't have the specificity of that typical high school visit where I'm just talking about New Albany or that one specific school, but we'll make those available 2 times a week in every single territory to make sure students are getting the information that they need. So right now, that's the plan for campus visits and what we're doing in terms of reaching out to students. But obviously everything is, if this pandemic has taught us anything, it's that nothing is final and everything is in flux. So we'll probably have a better idea a month down the road, and then that better idea might change. So.
Thanks, Tyler. So Stephanie and Tracy, I'm going to kind of flip that and talk a little bit more about the high school's plan for accepting high school visits in the fall, if that's okay with you. Stephanie, we'll start on your end this time.
Sure, yeah. I'll just say that I thought the process of figuring out the virtual high school visit would be a little easier than we are finding. I thought it would just be, simply, well, they'll just be virtual, they'll just be online. But we are currently operating in a hybrid mode. So we have about half of our students attending every day. And then we also have about 25% of our students who are working remotely. So we've kind of got a couple different populations to try to figure out. Our one of our hardest things is actually trying to figure out where we're going to put these kids so they can be on their computers for the visit. And we normally have a very nice college center. We can fit about 25 kids in there. We have a larger room we can fit about 80 in. But with social distancing, we can only get about, 5 or 6 kids in that usual 25 room. And the other room is, now going to be used for lunches and, things like that. So space is, we're trying to, figure that out. Also monitoring the visits. So what we've landed on is we are going to do virtual college visits at 2 o'clock and also 2:30, and we'll have up to 5 colleges at each time slot, because that is the time when most of our seniors will be either at home or transitioning to home. So they'll be able to attend those visits, from their own home, as opposed to, spots on our campus, just because we have so few spots. But, we're seeing a lot of colleges sign up for the virtual visits, which has been awesome, and definitely a lot more from around the country now that they're not having to travel. So we're excited to kind of see where this lands.
Yeah, so we actually in a given year have about 150 college admissions rep come on our campus. So, my first concern was I don't know, even virtually, if we're going to be able to handle that many. We also restructured our schedule so the kids have fewer classes every day, if you will. So our challenge has been, just like Stephanie said, trying to find places to put our kids, knowing that social distancing is also an issue. We also wanted to try to keep the integrity of the college visit. So while we're going to have a lot of them virtual and kids can kind of figure out where they need to go to do that, for probably, our more application heavy schools, we're going to try to reserve a room and seat up to 8 students twice a day in that room. So it feels a little bit more personal, like a true college admission rep visit. What I'm finding out in talking with my kids is maybe they're not doing as many online visits as they probably should be. So that's a concern for me. So I feel like the more we can mimic the actual college visit, the better that can be. And I think there's just something about, having that personal connection that, so-and-so is in the room talking to me virtually, but I know that that person's also probably going to be reviewing my application. And then the other tricky part that we're trying to figure out, and thank goodness I have a wonderful colleague, Becky Reedy, who has really been instrumental in taking this over. But we also aren't doing passes anymore for the faculty to sign because of COVID. So now we really have to be, on the ball to make sure we're getting faculty lists of kids that are going to be missing the class for that in-person virtual visit, if that makes sense.
Thanks. So we did have a question that came through the Q&A, and it's going to be directed towards Stephanie and Tracy. How can we at the college level support you and your students as they navigate through this unusual college search process? And on the second side of that, what are your students needing the most to assist in this process? So why don't we start with the first question. How can we at the college level support you and your students as they navigate through the search process? We'll go back to Stephanie.
Sure, and I really appreciate that question. We would love to have as much help and partnership with the colleges, as we typically do. I think this year, something we're discovering just in our own office with our own, staff and students is just having a little bit of grace and forgiveness will really go a long way this year. I think our kids are probably going to need more help with some of the, technical sides of the application, or troubleshooting why it won't submit, or, maybe they're not understanding part of the application. So, any kind of, friendliness and offers of help if kids are reaching out to you to kind of try and help them more with those more nitty-gritty kinds of things, as opposed to more the overall picture, I think will really help. I love what Miami's doing about, having different opportunities for them to meet with the reps and get questions answered, because, even when Tyler does do the virtual visit to our school, there may be many of our students who just can't meet that time slot. So, just things like that, things that you can be flexible about or helpful about, even though it may not necessarily be your job or, something that you typically do. Would be very appreciated on the high school side.
Yeah, I would say for me, it would be to articulate clearly on your website or your materials what your testing policy is, even for test optional. And also, articulate clearly when is the last day that you will accept test scores, let's say, for different deadlines. So with all the SATs and ACTs that have been canceled, we're probably going to have some kids, or a fair number, test in October. But is that going to be okay for an early action deadline? And, there's so many scenarios. Stephanie, I see you shaking your head affirming that message, that it's really hard to work with a kid who's applying to 8 schools and be like, well, gosh, you took the October, 25th or 6th, testing. I'm not quite sure if that's going to get there in time for, schools X, Y, and Z. So that could be very helpful. And the other thing that I'm also noticing as a counselor, and again, if you would, forgive me, is I'm really trying to have my staff sign up for all the different online events you are hosting. And I have it on my calendar, but then I discover a fire comes up. Not literally, of course, but, or a student drops in and needs something. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I never even logged into that program. So it's not intentional. It's just kind of the life we're living right now. So Tyler, Dave, mea culpa.
Thanks, Tracy. Tyler, I had a question come in for you. So from the college recruiter side, how are you collecting student prospect information during virtual visits?
Great question. So I guess the first thing I'll say is that we inherently understand that we've got to be flexible, and that the data collection process, more than any other year, is likely going to be imperfect from a certain respect. But honestly, that's not any different from any other year, because I'll go do high school visits and I hand out, a little request for information card, and there's inevitably students that just take that card and slip it in the book, or they put it in their backpack and don't fill it out. So I don't think it's going to be inherently different from what we do face to face. Now, in terms of the technical process, what we are doing when I register for a visit on rep visits or SCORE, or I do it individually with a counselor via email, there's like 30 steps that I have to follow to get this to all work correctly, and fingers crossed I know what I'm doing. But essentially what is happening, I am creating, rather than sending the Zoom link, I am creating an event within our system, which at Miami we use Slate, and then I send that event registration link to the individual high schools. What then happens is the high schools push that link out, students are taken to a registration page for an event, and they complete a form there. And then once that form is complete, we will then send them the Zoom link for the event with the passcode in the email that they used in the registration form. So that still allows us to collect information from the student, and that still allows us to make sure that it's marked in our system that, hey, they attended the event, they heard information about Miami. So we are basically the simplified just recap, having the students register on a Slate event landing page, and then sending them the Zoom link with the passcode via email afterwards. And that seems to be the easiest process for students to follow, but also still allows us to collect information for students to make sure they're in our system and getting all the up-to-date news and information.
Thanks, Tyler. We did have a question that came back in for the high school side of things as well. So do you prefer the college to set up the virtual visits for you at the high school, or do you as the high school prefer to set it up for the college? I think that we all kind of use different versions or different formats of meets, whether it be Zoom or Google Meet or whatever that might be. What do you guys think on that? Tracy, we'll start with you this time.
Yeah, so we actually use rep visits, and we are asking that the school provide the Zoom link. That way they're controlling it, and then they will share it with us. And then we will give it to our students who ultimately register for the visit. And actually our administrative assistant is kind of doing that all this year. So it's a big undertaking, but once she has that link, all is good. And I think I also forgot to say that we're only allowing seniors to do college rep visits this year. We typically allowed juniors and seniors, but with the social distancing, it's just too messy. So
Stephanie, you doing the same idea, I guess?
Same kind of thing. Yeah, we are also doing the rep visits. We would definitely prefer that the college set up their own link, and we don't really care if that's, you know, Zoom or, you know, Google Meets or whatever. Just on our end, it just would be really, really challenging for our college center assistant to be scheduling all those different things. And so we would just rather the college do it, and that way too, then the college people get to use what application they're most familiar with, because I know a lot of the colleges are using one or the other, or, you know, they've kind of learned how to use Zoom, so I want to keep using Zoom. So we figured that would hopefully be a little bit easier on the college's side.
Tyler, another question had come in for you. Several schools are not asking for registration forms, so to speak. What do you do in that situation?
Again, this is a year where I want to do whatever's in the best interest of the students, and I trust the counselors to know what's going to benefit their students most. And if they are saying that we should not use a registration form, in that particular instance, I might talk with the counselor and say, this is why we're using the registration form. Is there a way we can proceed with that? But if they would say that they would rather just have the Zoom link, I'm going to do whatever I have to do to be flexible and make it work for both sides. So in that instance, I would probably just go ahead and create the Zoom link and send that along. But I would just give the counselor the, I guess the preface that we're not going to be able to then have information on who attended the visit and be able to send students information as a result. So we've tried to streamline the process as much as we can, but knowing that it's going to be imperfect. But yeah, in the instance that a counselor asked me not to use a registration page, I would I wouldn't use one. I would just go ahead and send them the Zoom link.
Great, thanks. So with rep visits,
I should say, Dave, just real quick, one thing.
Yeah,
I've not had that happen yet, but I just wanted to add that in. I've not had anybody say that yet, but it sounds like based on the chat, some of my colleagues have.
Sure. Thanks for clarifying that as well. So with rep visits, once a student does sign up, do the colleges directly contact the students?
for us, no. Our administrative assistant is taking care of that. So we'll have a list of the kids who are going to that physical room and then who are going to be doing it virtually. And then we'll go ahead and send them the link.
Same for us.
Tyler, do you find that sharing the Slate link when scheduling via rep visits is useful? And then are you using the direct Zoom or virtual platform link?
So I find that the Slate link is useful just because, number one, there's the data collection piece to it. But the other thing is it sends that student an email with a direct link that they can click on with the passcode. That way they're not having to keep track of that on their own. They can literally just go to their email, search Miami, and then it's there if the day of the event they're having trouble logging in or whatever it is. So I find that particularly useful. The second part of the question was, and then follow up or using the direct Zoom. We are doing that follow-up, and maybe I'm not understanding the question. We are doing that follow-up by sending the email out. The other thing that's happening is we are not putting all the, by using this Slate landing page, we are not putting all the work on the counselors to get the word out about our visit, because obviously we have students in our system that have either submitted information forms or they've had a test score submitted to us or something along those lines. When I create that Slate visit, we also send out an email saying, hey, I'm going to be virtually visiting your high school on this date at this time. You can go to this website to register, and then we'll send you the Zoom link after registration. So I think it's mutually beneficial, honestly, to have that type of setup on both sides of the desk.
Thanks. So I think we covered the how do you adapt if they don't want to use a registration link question. But in the instance the counselor would prefer we not use registration pages, do the high school counselors have a plan to get us the students who have attended those visits? And we'll start with Stephanie.
Great question. You know, I don't think we've kind of gotten that far yet with all of our planning. We haven't, us personally, we haven't had a college visit yet. We've kind of put those off. We just started school. I think this is our 3rd day. So, you know, we're trying to kind of get our feet wet with just getting the kids in the building at this point. You know, I think that might be a little challenging, especially if the counselors are not able to monitor every single visit, since in our cases, we're going to be having at least 5 at a time. We only have 4 counselors. So, you know, we're actually going to see if some of our PTO can help us monitor that and try to use our parent volunteers in that way, just because, you know, we don't want to limit the number of visits we have, but at the same time, we want to try to have as much, you know, interaction as we can. You know, I really don't have a great suggestion for that other than maybe instructing the kids to sign up for the materials from the colleges, you know, getting on the mailing list and, you know, things like that, or, you know, taking down names and emails. Maybe the, you know, kids can put their emails in the chat box or something like that, that, you know, the admissions rep can see, but we have not formalized a process yet.
Yeah, that's exactly what we talked about. I mean, you know, we'll have a running list of kids who registered, but at the end of the day, I don't know if we can necessarily keep tabs of all who came in, especially the virtual. So our thought was that the kids can simply put their contact information in that chat feature, and then the reps could capture it that way. So
Thank you. So back to the high school counselors again, or the school counselors, I should say. So how do you all feel about marketing materials being mailed to your offices to pass out to students at this point in time? Stephanie?
I fear I may not be popular with this question.
I'm going to back you up because I know where you're going with it.
I was going to say, maybe I should have started with Tracy.
No, that's okay. I'll take the heat. It's fine. You know, it's really challenging for us to get marketing materials to students, even just in a typical situation. With COVID, with our kids being on a hybrid, with kids really not supposed to be allowed in the hallways, you know, when it's not class change time, it's very, very challenging. You know, I'm actually working remotely, so I'm not even going to be able to get some of the mail to the kids. I would say if you can either mail it directly to their houses or through, you know, emails, that would be a much better use of the materials. If there is something very specific for that child only, not like a mass, you know, mailing, but something very specific for that child, you know, yes, we can get that piece of mail to them. But, you know, just in this day and age with, you know, we don't even know if we're going to be in school for how long, you know, if COVID numbers start going up, we might have to go fully remote, and then people aren't even in the building necessarily, you know, to get the mail to the kids, or the kids aren't in the building. So I would say in this, you know, situation, wherever you can do mailing it directly to their house or through email, that would be much better, and it will probably get to them faster.
Yeah, kind of puts us in an awkward situation just because we've revamped our office, you know, to have students put their college, you know, list requests online. We're not even doing passes for rep visits, and then to hand out a physical, you know, document or form, you know, or publication from a college. It just kind of goes against everything we're trying to eliminate in the, you know, the year of COVID.
Is there a cost to use rep visits?
We have Naviance, and it's tied in with rep visits. So whatever, that's part of the package.
Same with us. I do think, Tyler, you may be able to answer for the college side, because I think there is some things for you guys.
Yeah.
We, on the college side, basically, if you have a membership with Hobson's or whoever it may be, then I think it's included. I think it's included with that in order for us to be able to use it. We have to register as a user within our institution. But I will say I'm helping assist with some of our recruitment on the West Coast this year. And a number of schools out there have also used like a Google scheduling tool. So that may be a workaround if you don't have rep visits, or if you don't have a Naviance account, then you could likely use one of those Google scheduling tools that are, I would imagine, free, and then have colleges schedule that way as well.
Yeah, so kind of staying along the same thread with rep visits, it says, can you clarify which link you use for rep visits? Is it a link to the specific Zoom meeting, or a link to the institution's CRM or / registration form?
So basically what is happening is the link that we are sending to the counselors and through rep visits is the Slate or CRM event link, right? So it basically takes them to a miamioh.edu/admission page, okay? They will then register and complete the form there, and then we email them the Zoom link afterwards. So the Zoom link comes via email. Now, I know that some people say, well, what happens if a student, they're logging in a minute before the visit? That's okay. They'll still be taken to that landing page where they'll have to complete a form, but then it'll pop up instantaneously after they complete it within like a certain time window. So it should be easy, even if students are clicking on that link at the last minute, to just quickly complete that form, and then they'll be taken into the event.
Thanks. So have other colleges used Qualtrics or other forms where they just post the link in the chat to collect student data? And I'll let anyone kind of jump in on that question.
I know at Miami, we looked at a number of different options, and this just seemed to be the cleanest from a student perspective. It sounds very complicated when I describe it, and maybe that's just because technology's not always my strong suit. But when you experience it from the other side, it is very easy. Just fill out a form, get a link, and I'm in, and I'm hearing Tyler present about Miami. So I think from a student perspective, this appeared to be the easiest, and also allowed us to market the visit to students that are in our system but may not hear about it through their counseling staff or something along those lines.
Thanks, Tyler. So there was just a comment that I will throw in. Obviously, people can see this, but it does say rep visits is free for the college reps to schedule the visits, but you need to pay for some of the additional features. So I think that the free version a lot of times will typically be used by a lot of institutions. So I thought I'd throw that in there as well. For the school counselors, would you be interested in having a college partner together to create a virtual college fair for your students in lieu of a private visit, or how do you think about that?
Quite honestly, I've been trying to push a lot of the virtual fairs to my kids, and I just don't know if they're doing them yet. I think there's something still to, and maybe if it's a smaller group, geographically, or there's some type of tie that they'd be interested in that. But I think, I'm sorry for saying this, I think the larger college visits are a little bit overwhelming for the kids, and they just crave that personalization and smaller intimacy. So.
Yeah, Stephanie?
Yeah, I would say that, we are definitely pushing more of those larger virtual college fairs out to students, the ones that are already, kind of established. I know a lot of, some of the in-person fairs. So, I'm a member on the Columbus Suburban College Fair that we have every year. We're even, going to be pushing people to do the virtual, format this year. I don't know if there's necessarily a huge need for colleges to, partner up. I kind of agree with Tracy that I think the students really just want that information on that particular college. I think it might be a little challenging as far as on the Naviance and rep visit side, because, you know, I'm not quite sure how we would have, you know, 5 or 6 colleges in on the same, you know, visit, and still getting that out to all of the students who have that college on their list. But, you know, I think the individual ones are probably going to be the best bet, but, you know, other high schools may feel a little different about it.
Thank you. So this is for any of you. It's really kind of for those who just started using Slate. Do you create an event on Slate for each visit, or do you use the same landing page?
I do create an individual event in Slate. So I'm essentially creating an individual Slate event for every single high school visit that I'm doing, and then sending that specific link. And the reason that we did that, because I think that we looked at the idea of, well, what if we just have one Zoom link that every recruiter uses for all their visits? But the thing that scared us about that is, let's say you're doing 2 visits back to back, right? And you're using the same link. You might all of a sudden have some students from this second high school joining at the tail end of the first one. And if you're talking about something specific in that high school, maybe that first school doesn't offer AP courses, and you're talking about how you're looking at rigor of the curriculum, that then gets extremely confusing for a student who doesn't understand why they're jumping in at the middle of a visit. So we did decide to use individual Zoom and Slate event links for every single high school visit. It's a lot more cumbersome to enter, I can tell you, but I've got myself down to 4 minutes. I can enter a high school visit in 4 minutes flat now, and I'm good. But again, it's about what's in the best interest of the students, and we felt like having that individual visit with the specific event was in their best interest.
Thanks, Tyler. So there is some advice that's being asked. Or they're asking for some advice. What if your university does not have a CRM? What would be your advice on how to get started recruiting during the pandemic, as far as the communication aspect is concerned, I'm gonna guess?
Talk to the person who controls your budget and get a CRM. No, I'm joking. I know budgets are tight. Here, you could do this without a CRM. Now, I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get the word out to students, because in my mind, you've got to have some type of database where you're being able to communicate with students at particular high schools and things like that. But in that instance, sending that Zoom link in through rep visits would be just fine, and not having the registration page, and then looking for some of these other additional free or add-on tools where you can send something to the chat to have them then complete a form and collect the information. Again, it's not as clean of a process, but I understand resources are tight. It's difficult, and not every school is going to be able to invest money, because CRMs can be very expensive. So I think that you would likely be looking for something that students can either complete by clicking a link in the chat feature. The other thing that's possible too, and again, you'll have to forgive me because technology is not my strong suit, but I have seen some schools go to a format, and I believe StriveScan even offers this, where a student can essentially use their phone and scan one of the little QR codes, and then be taken to a form on your website where they can then complete the information. That would also be a great way. It's not going to tie it to a specific event, but that's okay. If they can scan that QR code, then they're taken to a request for information form and submit it. That would also be one way to collect some student information. So I would look into those opportunities as well. But yeah, it's more difficult without a CRM, but doable. You gotta be a little bit of a MacGyver.
Thanks, Tyler. So just as a heads up, we are about 5 minutes away from the end of the presentation. So I just want to make sure everyone is aware of that, and I'll make sure we wrap up prior to the session ending. But we do have some questions, and I know that if we don't get to your question, that we will make sure we do have the transcript, and we'll make sure to reach out to you individually to make sure that those questions are answered for you. But going back to get back to some of the questions, this question is directed towards Tracy and Stephanie. How would you feel about one college inviting multiple high schools to the same event or information session just about that one particular college or university? Tracy, we'll start with you.
I don't think it's a bad thing. I think the question mark is logistically, how would that work? Just because I guess if it's an evening program, of course, but if it's a day program, we're all in different schedules. I don't know how you would do that within different platforms, some virtual, some in person. So, and then you're working with, 2 or 3 different coordinators at different high schools. So I don't know, it just kind of seems like a lot of things to plan out.
Yeah, I mean, I would have the suggestion that if you are going to be doing that, to let the students know at the very beginning that they're going to be seeing kids from other high schools or having questions being asked that don't relate, necessarily to them or their high school's curriculum. I think the high school students are not necessarily aware that might be happening or prepared for that. So, if you can do an individual visit, I think that would be better. However, I understand how the college reps are pulled so many directions and you have to get so many visits in and, all of that. So, but I would definitely let the kids know at the start of the presentation so that they're aware.
Can I ask Tyler a question based on something Stephanie just said?
Sure.
Is there an expectation that you're to do even more visits this year?
No, that's thank goodness, no.
Okay.
At least not at Miami. I think
Okay.
there's an expectation that if there's a school we've been wanting to visit for a while that we just haven't been able to work in our schedule, that we might have a little bit more flexibility to try it. But I think we also understand that there is a large element of this that is out of our control, and that's whether or not schools are going to have the bandwidth to even offer us an opportunity to register, things like that. So I think that's why we added in that twice a week open session for any student from any high school to attend, just to make sure that at the end of the day, in my mind, the visit number doesn't matter nearly as much as the impact I'm making and the reach I'm having. So whether I'm reaching that student through an individual visit at their high school or whether I'm reaching them in one of these group visits that have multiple high schools included in one is okay. It's all about the impact that we're making and making sure that we're getting the Miami experience and our message out to as many students as possible. So yeah, fortunately at Miami, not an expectation that visit numbers would increase.
Okay. I was just wondering if our requests were going to increase. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, and I can't speak for every school. And I think some schools, if their back's against a corner, and we all know that this has changed the college admission landscape for a lot of schools out there, and for many schools in a bad way, you may expect requests from schools that, in normal years you haven't heard of.
Sure.
We're not expecting to increase that at Ohio State, just from that perspective. Okay, we have 2 minutes. I'm going to run through this quickly. So from what I'm hearing, school counselors do not want to hear from the admissions counselors, or do want to hear from the admissions counselors. Was I incorrect to assume that you can't or don't have time to think about college rep visits right now, or is that something that you are taking and or are okay with at this point? We'll start with you.
So I would say, please, go ahead and sign up, for the visits. We definitely want you to be signing up. If you are reaching out individually to a counselor right now, just be aware that we are probably pretty backlogged on our email and phone calls. I think I got 200 emails just on the first day of school. So just have a little grace and forgiveness with us. But yes, we definitely want you to be making college visits. Just know there might be a little lag time.
Oh yeah, we are definitely open for business, and the kids are craving it actually. So yeah.
Well, thank you guys. I do not want to get cut off, so I'm going to thank all of you for joining us today. I want to thank our panelists. You guys did a wonderful job. The questions that we did not get to, again, we'll get those out to you individually. But again, thank you all for attending. We do hope you found this session informative, and we look forward to hopefully seeing everyone in person sometime in the near future. So thank you all so much, and Tracy, Stephanie, and Tyler, thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. And thanks, Dave.
Thanks.
Thanks.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is just one of many sessions being hosted, so be sure to check out the full schedule and join our next session, which starts in 15 minutes. And in about a week, you'll be able to find the session's recording as well as all of the other sessions recordings on the same website. Thanks so much.